Susie Guillory was the wife of a well-to-do white businessman in Sulphur, Louisiana, and she wanted to change the racial description on her birth certificate from colored to white. Mr. Fraser said Louisiana was made the laughingstock of the nation. Governor David C. Treen today signed legislation repealing a Louisiana statute that established a mathematical formula to determine if a person was Black. So she has spent thousands, the article says. Mrs. Phipps, whose skin is white, which I think is just like such a weird thing. It's like, did they hold a piece of paper up to her and be like, verified? Has spent thousands of dollars on legal proceedings to prove that she is white in the eyes of the state as well, and that a mistake was made on her birth record. There's a photograph of my mom as a newborn. I just saw it for the first time. My mom was born in 1961 in New York State. It's funny to try to see a picture like your parent, seeing the picture as a newborn. But if she had been born in Louisiana, where her grandmother had been born, the state would have legally listed her as colored or as a Negro. Now, I know that my channel has been getting demonetized. Videos have been getting demonetized. I've been getting flagged. I've been getting in trouble for using the word colored on here. And I've kind of been going back and forth about what to do. Should I delete those videos or not? I decided I'm not going to delete them. It's okay if I get in trouble for them by getting shadow banned or whatever, because this is my family story. So my name's Danielle Romero. Thank you so much for being with me here today on my channel, where we talk about American identity and family stories. There was a law in Louisiana, and it stayed on the books until 1983. I was born in 1986. And it said that if you had more than one 32nd, I'm going to put the math up on the screen, of so-called Negro blood, you were designated as Black or colored, no matter what you looked like, no matter how you were raised, no matter how you saw yourself. If the right people or the wrong people caught whiff of your ancestry, this could happen to you. Now, the first time I saw it written down, I had to double check. 1/32 is like nothing. It's like nothing. That's not a number most people carry around in your heads. 1/32 of anything feels like a rounding error almost. A trace amount. But in Louisiana, they had a name for that trace. It was your Negro blood fraction. I want to talk about the New York Times article talking about it. Attorney Kenneth Davis put it this way, quote, given the law of being 1/32 Negro makes you Black, he said this can only be understood by Louisiana as, quote, an official statement that Negro ancestry is a taint that must be traced. So I'm going to jump over to this article. Before I do, if you would love to support the work I'm doing here on YouTube, please join me over at my Patreon at patreon.com/NYTN. Like I said, YouTube has been just, I'm getting flagged, videos are getting demonetized, I'm getting in trouble. Is there a point if I'm just going to keep getting roasted on YouTube? But honestly, one of the main reasons I haven't really is my Patreon community. And I'm so thankful for the support, and it's really helped me keep going. So thank you so much. Let's jump over to that article from the New York Times. So this is the headline. This is the headline. And when people come after me, which they do online for like stirring up racial problems or whatever I'm accused of, I like to just point people to this, because 1983 is really not that long ago. To have had a law like this on the books affected my family, certainly. We want to talk about a taint. I think this is a real taint on our history. And I think it's so important to be able to see something that makes us uncomfortable, and instead of rushing to write it off, kind of take a step back and place it in context and see how powerful the past can be. So this article is from its original context, July 6th, 1983, Section 8, page 10. You can buy a reprint, it says, if you'd like. So here's how it looks. I'm going to read the article to you. So Louisiana repeals the Black Blood Law. Governor David C. Treen today signed legislation repealing a Louisiana statute that established a mathematical formula to determine if a person was Black. I'm sorry, I got a little emotional on this. The law establishing the formula, passed by state legislators in 1970, said that anyone having 1/32 or less of Negro blood should not be designated as Black by the Louisiana state officials. The legislator who wrote the law repealing the formula, Lee Fraser, a 34-year-old Democrat representing a racially mixed district in New Orleans, said recently he had done so because of national attention focused on the law by a highly publicized court case there. So it wasn't just like out of the goodness of the government's hard. They're like, let's get rid of this outdated law. No, they got roasted in a court case. We're going to talk about that. And the case involves the vigorous but thus far unsuccessful efforts of Susie Guillory Phipps. And the Guillorys, connected to the Guillorys, if you're from Louisiana or you have Creole roots or anything like that, the Guillorys are like you almost have to be connected to them if you're from Louisiana. Susie Guillory was the wife of a well-to-do white businessman in Sulphur, Louisiana, and she wanted to change the racial description on her birth certificate from colored to white. I'm going to pause here. Cousins of mine in Louisiana, I've heard, have also gone through this process, which, it was, I think, because they didn't see themselves as colored. That's a whole conversation, right? How do you see yourself? My grandmother's brother, my Uncle Danny, who I interviewed, he found out later in life that even though he was born in New York, his birth certificate was listed as colored as well. And it was strange for my family because we were not connected to the Louisiana side. And that's what I've been doing, is trying to build that connection back. So she has spent thousands, the article says. Mrs. Phipps, whose skin is white, which I think is just like such a weird thing. It's like, did they hold a piece of paper up to her and be like, verified? Has spent thousands of dollars on legal proceedings to prove that she is white in the eyes of the state as well, and that a mistake was made on her birth record. Now, if you know the Guillory family, you know that this is a pretty mixed, multi-generationally mixed family. But also it's interesting, like, why is it so important for her to prove that she's white? Does it bring benefit? Or is it just because she doesn't like seeing that on there? Doesn't represent her? Doesn't feel like it represents her? Mr. Fraser said, I felt really badly that this had not only made local but national headlines. Mr. Fraser said, Louisiana was made the laughingstock of the nation. He said the key to success of the law's repeal was legislation passed last week that allows a person to change birth records by presenting a preponderance of evidence to prove that the old record is wrong. So basically, they're like, okay, you can change it, but you have to like really prove it to us. Prove it, jump 10 times. The old law, it says, was much more stringent. There was no room for doubt. Like, you weren't allowed to kind of get in there and wrestle with the records. Mr. Fraser said that in the future, it would be possible for a person to change birth records by sworn statements from family members, doctors, and others. He said that his research shows that the designation of race on official documents in this area from the late 1700s, and its purpose was to, quote, keep control over land ownership, to keep landowners from having to share land with illegitimate children who were family members. Reading between the lines, men who had children with women of color and then did not want to give those children any part of the inheritance. And a lot of times, these kids they're legally black, but they might have only been as mixed as me or less, or, but the one drop rule was not just like on a whim, it was to retain power. And I know people will come after me for being a Marxist or a communist or whatever term is used inappropriately here, but truly, this is the historical record. Feel how you will feel, but this is the record. I'm going to keep jumping down. So there was a department lawyer who represented Louisiana against Mrs. Phipps in this case. And he said that the repeal of the blood law will have no effect on the Phipps case because, quote, the formula was not central in this case. All right. So he said that the 1970 blood law has superseded a long line of state court opinions that use the term any traceable amount of black ancestry. And that was the proper way to define a Negro. Listen, we don't need to get into the legal weeds on this. I think what's important is that we're getting the assistant attorney general involved in this case. This case is so entrenched in the experience of being from Louisiana, the history of Louisiana. I would even go as far as to say the history of the South, that we're getting the attorney general involved. Have you ever seen a court case where they're doing the math on English blood, on Welsh blood, on Irish blood, like to do the math on this? Mr. Westholt said that Mrs. Phipps had lost her case against the state because older records attesting to her racial background and other evidence had corroborated the information there that a midwife put on. So basically saying, we looked at your records and you are mixed, or you do have this. And I think it's really interesting because, again, when I started this journey, I had really no idea what was in the records for my family, this side of the family in New York, saw themselves as French from Louisiana, as my mom would say. And the records showed otherwise. I mean, we do have French heritage, we have French last name, Perot, but if we're going by just genealogy records, mixed family. And so Mr. Westholt said that the publicity generated by the case had brought a surge, their words, a surge of requests from applicants wishing to change a description of their race on old birth records. Why do you think this would happen? In 1980, he said the state had stopped mentioning race on birth records except in the confidential files kept for statistical purposes. That is infuriating to me on so many levels. I'm going to scroll down. Lawyers say they don't know exactly what the effect of the repeal of the formula will be, but they stress that the applications were narrow. That's not what he said. Mrs. Phipp's lawyer, so Susie Guillory's lawyer, said the law was a bad law, but the repeal was worse. So he said, you're not doing any good to repeal this law without having something to take its place. You're exchanging the 1/32nd rule, which is laughable, to a traceable amount, which is obscene. It just goes from bad to worse for Louisiana here. And he's basically saying traceable amount of African ancestry is just as ridiculous. This is just as ridiculous. And her attorney goes on to say the preponderance of evidence looks good. Like this sounds like, oh, they're giving us an olive branch, but there's no way out if you look white and all your records say you're colored. If the records say you're colored, your blue eyes, blonde hair, white skin, sister's color don't matter because we don't know what makes a person colored. There's a third viewpoint here. The third viewpoint was offered by Ronald Davis, the state assistant attorney general. So I'm saying, like, everybody's got their hat in the ring on this, like, this is important to Louisiana, and it has been. Mr. Davis says he's pleased because the repeal of the law means that the state is not in the business of officially determining race. Because it can't. Never has been able to, okay? It has never been possible to do that. He said the new legislation will make it easier for people to change their racial designation. And it's meaningful from a symbolic point of view because Louisiana has appeared to be in the dark ages. And he said there's no reason for traceable amount to creep back into the criteria. Okay, I'm going to link to this for you guys. So let's talk about this crazy article. Wonder how many people have really read that article. So the law is gone, but the logic of it, or I'd say the urge of it, the urge to divide, to classify the police identity down to a fraction is still with us. And I think in a way, the math still outlived the law. I think every time we take a DNA test or we look at our family tree or the government forces us to choose a box that doesn't really fit, it's there. And my family lived on the margins of this story. I think close enough to feel that, but also there are many people who weren't straddling the line enough who really had no choice at all in how they were identified or classified. But that's why I want to tell a story, because not everybody was able to escape the way that my great-grandmother did, kind of. Didn't really, tried to. Because even if we outrun this paperwork, though, we still carry our history with us. And what I want to say is that we are not fractions. You are not a fraction of this, a percent of this, or whatever. We're whole. You're whole. Near you. I love doing the family story work. I love the intersection of that with history and all of that and figuring out all these parts and pieces. It's beautiful. But at the end of the day, it's one tree. It's not a million trees. It's a tree with a lot of leaves on it, a lot of branches on it, but it's one tree. It's one family tree, your family tree. I refuse to be defined by the math of strangers. I'm not a fraction. I'm a whole. So thank you so much for being with me here today on my channel. And this video in particular was a Patreon supporter asked me to talk about this in depth because we touch on this topic a lot in videos, but I've never done a full video devoted to it. And so please, I never ask this. I don't know if I've ever asked this, but please share this video if you found it helpful or interesting or important, because I'm really struggling against YouTube right now. It's been a terrible battle. And that's why I'm so glad to have the Patreon outlet where we can still have that community. But I think these topics are still really important, especially now more than ever. So if you think so, I hope that you will join me in spreading this knowledge. Otherwise, we'll talk soon.